Hello, this is McMulligan, back again with more Dark Souls. So we had a bit of a hiccup when it came to recording audio earlier. Apparently this PlayStation didn't pick up my audio when I was recording last time, so here we are. Now, as I recall, I was going up to basically, well, we're going up to, get out of this shithole that I called Lighttown. Well, this place is a bit of an interesting lore bit, and I read some item descriptions that we'll get to here in a bit once we get to that. But, in the meantime, we're going up this, thing, well, this little water wheel that's, I can only assume was probably, well, it's being used as an elevator right now. Don't think that's its actual purpose. I think some of the denizens of this place use it for that. Kind of a dangerous elevator, if you ask me. But on the other hand, could be useful, and I think it'd be only few ways you can make an elevator outside of magic or anything like that. But still kind of dangerous in this place. I was kind of being a bit cautious. Well, I say cautious, but I was kind of going ham all over the place when I was recording this originally. Man, wish I still had that audio. But to get to the point where I'm going to be going through a bit more of the sewer part of, well, a little section off from this place. It's a bit of sewer. Mostly to collect the Firekeeper's soul that's there. Now, that thing, well, useful for obviously upgrading the Estus. Thought there might be an interesting item description on it compared to the other ones. Turns out not the case. I think that might be 3 that does that with the bone shards. Because I think it was 3. It was one of the games that actually had some unique descriptions depending on I guess Estus equivalent upgrades are. At least for the area they're in. That being said, clearly a Firekeeper came down here and basically deep sixed. Very dead. Very, very dead. Kinda can't blame her for being dead. There's a lot of deadly things down here. I'm just wondering why she came down here in the first place. Probably, well, the thing I could only assume is she probably was seeking the flame down in Easelith and just happened to die along the way. Honestly, I can think of worse deaths, but not many. Well, actually, I remember what I was talking about now. So, as we're getting to everything and continually moving through this area, I actually played in because I reference D&D a lot, but we actually had this Dark Souls kind of D&D game based around it. It was primarily with Dark Souls 3, but we had a lot of the areas from the other Dark Souls games added into it. And I gotta tell you, you think that Blight Town's bad in Dark Souls? You think it's a horrible, wretched piece of shit of a place to be? You clearly have never tried playing it in anything like D&D. You think poison's bad in Dark Souls, man? Nah. D&D with poison. Yeah, you're taking damage. Not only are you taking damage, you're also slowed to shit. So not only can you not do shit, you also are basically slowly dying. Only if you're low level in a D&D game, it's not slow. It's very quick. Think poison being worse than Toxin quick. Depending on your level anyway. And then our DM also made its stat for Toxin, which was just poison on steroids is the only way I can describe it. It is because as I recall, base poison basically means to where you can only use I believe it limits your actions, but Toxin went a bit of a step further. It halved your movement on top of that. So you couldn't move, you couldn't hardly take any actions. You also were taking double the amount of damage you'd be taking from a normal poison, and it was absolutely awful. Still a fun game, and I love my DM anyway, but that's another story. That going on, though, while we're still going around here, I actually... You know what, I can probably talk about my D&D character, a few of the D&D characters in it. The original group, well, we had a few character switches, but I'll get to what the main group was. So it was me, I was playing a paladin, monk. Name was Mia. Yeah, I know, gender band, fuck off. And, basically, it was... I was high power as shit, really fast, I hit like a truck, and I had a lot of attacks. Think Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star in changeling form. It felt like that because I would just detonate bosses sometimes. And the reason for that being was due to the fact that I made this character originally because when we first made the Dark Souls D&D game, it was originally just supposed to be me playing it, but then we had the whole like rest of a party join, and it was all in good fun. I had no problem with it, and it ended up being a really fun game. But so it would still be to the point that I would kind of like murder the ever living shit out of out of like a lot of like the single big enemies. That being said, I was not the only powerful one, just kind of the most broken when it came to like fighting bosses, at least in most scenarios. Now, the other end of the broken spectrum, we also had our Pyromancer, because how we basically ran the Dark Souls games was you were leveled into 2 classes at the same time, so you were effectively level 40 by the end of the game. And we had a wizard sorcerer who was a Pyromancer, and this man would detonate everything. Just like you couldn't like have him fight a group of enemies; he would just murder them, and it was like, okay, we'll just make things resistant to fire or immune to fire. No, that doesn't work. What's going to happen is he's going to do one AoE. It's not going to affect them the first time if they're immune, but he had a little ability where he would ignore immunities and he would burn through resistances and could even make people who, say, had no resistance at all vulnerable to fire. Which means he was doing double damage, so he could literally just detonate an army if he wanted to. This led to some balancing issues, but the game was a hell of a lot of fun. And, granted, we ended up stopping halfway through, but we did reboot it as of recently with a new group, but I'll get to that later. But the other bit of that crew was we also had, oh, and you know what, just to give the names, my character's name was Mia. Our wizard's character's name was Devlon Rise. He was a very famous pyromancer in life until he got brought back as the undead. Then we had Val, or Valkyrie was her full name, and she was like a fallen angel, now undead, and she was a monk. She was a monk cleric. By the way, we had a lot of monks in that first game. It was unintentional. I thought I was going to be the only monk. Then everyone decided to play a monk but the wizard. So it was literally just like everybody was kung fu fighting, and then the one guy in the background shooting fireballs. That is what that game became. So, continue on with this little discussion. So Val was basically kind of our healer, but also kind of like the other ass kicker. Only she didn't quite kick as much ass as me, but I actually really liked her character still. It was not made to be a broken piece of shit like I was. The classes of monk and cleric didn't really mesh well, but you know, you do what you do. On the other end, we do what we do. Actually, what was that thing, Val's thing? Because like, what the hell was it? Oh yeah, now I remember. Yeah, but Val was like all in the wind and everything. She was all over the wind element, air, all that kind of stuff. It was really cool. My character was all about fire, kind of like our pyromancer. A little obsessed with it, kinda. Ended up becoming partially a fire elemental, but that's a story for like later in the that was something that happened later in the campaign. And then we had another player early on, but he dipped out like very early on in the game, so not really counting him. He was a changeling, a very large changeling, not changeling. What the hell am I talking about? Tiefling. But he was a tiefling of like a chain devil or something, so he had like a lot of chains, and his name was unironically named Chains. I believe his backstory was he was originally a pirate captain. Kind of an asshole. Character was interesting, but kind of an asshole. Granted, not as much of an asshole as our wizard, but you know, that's another story entirely. So then we had our other mainstay character, who I actually kind of forget the name of, but because it's been a while, and they were like there for like the second half of the game, but I just kind of don't remember for some reason. But their whole thing was they really liked ice, and they were like this ice like dragon. I think it was Dragonborn. Yeah, ice Dragonborn that was, I believe, a rogue and a paladin. I think no, it wasn't paladin. It was Warlock, I think, was the other class. And they were interesting. And for some reason, despite the wizard having shown the case that he hates ice with all his passion in the world, for some reason, really like this Dragonborn, and we all are still confused to this day as to why that was the case. But this Dragonborn was a very powerful rogue. Like, they hit like a truck. Granted, they couldn't hit quite as hard as like a truck as I could, but I was more burst DPS because, you know, I only had a certain amount of smites, whereas this one keeps sneak attacking. And it led to an interesting party comp, because I actually bounced really well off that rogue in combat. At least when it came to being in melee, because at that point I was like, wasn't the only melee fighter, but that's just kind of how that went. We also had the person who was playing Val switched out for another character named that we all called BLT. Yes, I know, goofy ass name. But BLT was his actual name was Boris, but his he was essentially this old general who led some armies of elves and shit. We didn't really get too far into his backstory because the game ended shortly after he got introduced. But essentially, he was like, think like not edgy Batman and obsessed with sandwiches. Like, I'm not kidding. This man would had an item that would allow him to teleport, and we never knew where he'd teleport to, but he'd always come back with sandwiches for everyone for some fucking reason. You know, the best use of a teleporting item I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know. It was just it was a beautiful character, but at the same time, it was like goofy Batman, and I loved it. Oh, he's talking. I'll let him speak.
One more now, if you have the heart for it.
Well, I have a heart. If that counts. Well, I don't know if I don't know if Sir Dinkelteen has one. That's what I'm gonna call him now, because he looks like fucking Lord Palpatine. Looks like medieval Lord Palpatine, like Emperor Palpatine. It's just like, okay, he's like, do it. Do it. Oh yeah, this is where I pull out the Crimson Robe. Look at the item. Robe of Sorcerers who flooded New Londo to seal away the dark raids, and the four kings who descended into the dark. These slayers were once known as healers, and the bright crimson was a symbol of that. So, interesting thing. These guys were basically kind of a bit of an inquisition against the Abyss. Oh, this item here. It symbolizes their resolve to keep the seal shut forever and the atonement for all who were sacrificed, but 2 of the 3 forsook New Londo upon tiring of their duty. So yes, these guys were kind of the Inquisition, leading to try to keep out the Abyss, which I talked about earlier with, you know, Artorias' whole fight against the Abyss and everything. And over here I'm actually going to kind of look down, because the area I just came up, that elevator, was actually how you get to that city that was flooded. That one, by the way, was the old capital, Old Londo. That place, yeah, like I said, got affected by the Abyss, kept turning everyone insane, and turned everyone into these dark beings, amalgamations of just awful. And it's still down there, by the way. We're going to eventually go down there and unflood that whole area. But something fun I actually like to note in that bit of the lore is if you pay attention to Blighttown used to be kind of a mog, like it used to be flooded up more before, and they essentially used the water that was built up in Blighttown to flood up the old Londo, which is why it's basically empty at this point. They still water's still being pumped down there naturally from the sewer system, but you know, at this point, everyone's kind of dead, so I guess there's really any sewage to go through. That being said, the sewage that was left definitely left Blighttown in a muck. The other thing I like to, at least something I like to interpret from that, is that I think all the residents of Blighttown were some of the residents that managed to escape Old Londo, like the old capital, and basically made it to that little shithole to take refuge because they weren't allowed into like the main city, because anyone who came up from there was essentially killed the moment they tried to come up here. Kind of can't blame Gwyn for wanting to do that, but at the same time, kind of a dick move when you have people who are like completely fine that, you know, are basically left down there to rot and go insane and become hollow undead. Yeah, he sent this guy down there. Off camera, I went back down there and, well, He's kind of dead now. Granted, I already bought all the pyromancies off him, so I'm fine in that regard, but I do need to get the other pyromancer later in the game so that I can keep upgrading that. That being said, I'm trying to remember where I went from here. I think I was just looking around, talking for a bit of the lore. But yes, he goes out on a search for her, and then you'll find him down here, and well, you kind of kill him at that point because he's gone hollow. I assume he probably died down there, and you just find him and have to kill him at that point. I think I go up here to talk to the cleric guy, but he doesn't really have anything interesting to say, like the boring dumbass he is. Also, good thing to note, I forgot to mention it earlier, but when we came up here, you could easily see that the Firekeeper's dead, and as such, the bonfire there cannot be lit, cannot be rested at. You're kind of fucked in that regard. We, however, will be going later in the game to go kill that guy, get her soul back, and put it back in her body, because that is something you can do if you didn't know that you could. So it is a reversible thing, which is why I went ahead and went through with it. Yeah, he doesn't have anything more interesting to say than he did last time. Not until we go into the catacombs again, anyway. I don't even think you can buy the gestures from. And this is where Frampt should be, but for some reason he glitched, and we'll be meeting with him at the beginning of the next video. I actually ended up fixing that by just unloading and reloading back into the game, and he was there. I don't know, it was a weird glitch, but it's fixed now. I think we're getting towards the end of recording now. Would love to chat more about D&D, but I don't have time for it at the moment. But, that being said, I think this is about where we're going to end it. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I'll be continuing to upload these regularly. I just had something come up the other day that caused it to where I couldn't record yesterday, but should all be back on track now. I try to record these in a batch for the week and get those all done. Just wasn't able to do that yesterday. Anyway, this has been McMulligan. Hope you all had a great day, and take care.